June 2026. Airlines around the world are begging for new narrow-body aircraft. Order one today, wait a decade for delivery. Yet only one new program has barely registered with international buyers. China spent over a decade and tens of billions of dollars building the C919. Boeing and Airbus admit it is a long-term threat. Not a single foreign airline has firmed an order. Here is what actually went wrong. The C919 program was launched by the Chinese state in 2008. The Commercial Aircraft Corporation of China, COMAC, was established that year with a single mission: break the Boeing and Airbus duopoly over commercial aviation. At the time, the two Western manufacturers controlled approximately 90% of the global aircraft market. Every narrow-body flying a Chinese domestic route was either a Boeing 737 or an A320. Beijing wanted that to end. The C919 was positioned directly against the A320neo family and the Boeing 737 MAX. Same category, same routes, same passengers. On paper, the aircraft looked like a real contender. A clean sheet, 21st century design with modern aerodynamics, none of the legacy baggage of frames tracing back to the 1980s and 1960s respectively. Domestically, the program is working. China Eastern took the launch customer position in May 2023. By the end of 2025, the C919 had carried over 2 million passengers within China. 3 of the country's largest carriers now operate the type, flying routes connecting Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Chengdu, and other major economic hubs. The order book exceeds 1,000 commitments across more than 24 customers. A shortened variant, the C919-600, rolled off the production line in January 2026. A stretched version targeting the A321neo segment is already in development. Both Boeing and Airbus leadership have publicly described COMAC as a genuine, long-term competitive threat. The aircraft flies, the factory produces, passengers ride. And yet, as of June 2026, international carriers treat the C919 as though it does not exist. The reason has nothing to do with whether the aircraft can fly. It has everything to do with 3 structural problems that compound each other. Start with the engine. The C919 is currently powered by the CFM LEAP-1C, produced by CFM International, the joint venture between GE Aerospace and Safran of France. The LEAP family is among the most advanced turbofan engines ever built. The A320neo uses the LEAP-1A. The Boeing 737 MAX uses the smaller LEAP-1B. The LEAP-1C sounds like a sibling. It is not. According to industry sources, the LEAP-1C was developed with certain advanced technology deliberately withheld. CFM and its Western suppliers had legitimate concerns that cutting-edge components might be reverse-engineered and channeled into China's indigenous CJ1000A engine program. Some analysts describe the LEAP-1C as sitting closer in capability to an upgraded CFM56 than to its LEAP family siblings. The weight figures tell the story directly. The LEAP-1C wet weight measures between 3,929 and 3,935 kilograms. The LEAP-1A sits between 2,990 and 3,153 kilograms. That is over 900 kilograms of additional engine weight on a narrow-body aircraft, where every kilogram drives fuel burn across thousands of cycles. Independent estimates suggest the C919 burns approximately 10% more fuel per seat than the A320neo. On a single flight, the gap is manageable. Across a fleet of hundreds of aircraft flying daily for 20 years, that number determines whether an airline survives or struggles. The C919 also carries nearly 6,000 liters less fuel than the A320, with range sitting between 4,075 and 5,555 kilometers against the A320neo's 6,300 to 6,480 kilometers. For Chinese domestic routes, that range is sufficient. For the medium-haul flying international low-cost carriers depend on, it becomes a hard structural limitation. Now, the second problem, and the one most observers underestimate: airlines do not buy aircraft. They buy ecosystems. Committing to a fleet type means signing up for the global spare parts network, maintenance facilities on every continent, certified engineers, pilot simulators, leasing companies that understand the asset's residual value, and a manufacturer expected to remain operational for the next 30 years. The acronym airlines fear most is AOG, aircraft on ground. When a jet becomes unserviceable, with no spare parts nearby and no qualified engineers reachable, that aircraft hemorrhages cash by the hour and destroys customer trust. Boeing and Airbus spent decades building those ecosystems. Partners across Japan, Britain, France, Canada, Italy, Germany, and dozens of other countries are deeply integrated with both manufacturers. The network is invisible to passengers, but defines every fleet planning decision. COMAC has not yet built that infrastructure outside China. For a regional carrier in Southeast Asia considering an order for 20 C919s, the question is not whether the aircraft will fly. The question is, what happens when it does not? The third problem is structural Western dependence. Bank of America analysts estimate that the C919 incorporates parts from 48 American suppliers, 26 European firms, and only 14 Chinese entities. That is not a Chinese aircraft with some imported components. It is a globally sourced aircraft with a Chinese fuselage and a Chinese flag. In May 2025, the United States temporarily suspended exports of the LEAP-1C engine to China amid escalating trade tensions. The ban was lifted within weeks. The damage to international confidence was already done. Washington demonstrated that a single political decision could effectively ground the entire C919 fleet. For international buyers evaluating the aircraft, that is not a theoretical risk. It is a live commercial vulnerability. China is aware of the dependency. The CJ1000A engine is in advanced testing. Analysts expect initial certification around 2027 or 2028. Building a production-ready commercial jet engine, however, is one of the most demanding tasks in modern manufacturing. Mass production at airline reliability standards typically requires several additional years beyond first certification. The regulatory wall remains standing. Before any non-Chinese airline can operate the C919 commercially, the aircraft requires certification from EASA, the European Union Aviation Safety Agency, or from the United States FAA. EASA began working with COMAC after a bilateral agreement came into force in 2020. COMAC originally targeted approval by the end of 2025. That deadline was missed by a wide margin. EASA test pilots arrived in Shanghai in early 2026 to begin verification flights. Certification is now expected somewhere between 2028 and 2031. COMAC is not currently pursuing FAA certification at all, given its placement on the United States Pentagon's list of companies allegedly linked to the Chinese military. Two countries, Brunei and Vietnam, have accepted China's CAAC authority as a recognized regulator. That is a start. It is not a market. Historical context matters here. When Airbus launched commercial operations in the early 1970s, American Airlines refused its aircraft for years. Credibility was earned flight by flight. 5 decades later, Airbus holds roughly half the global commercial aircraft market. China holds resources the original Airbus consortium could only have imagined. A domestic market needing tens of thousands of aircraft over the next 2 decades. A government prepared to subsidize indefinitely. Engineering talent improving with every delivery. As of June 2026, 38 C919 aircraft are flying. Each flight hour adds to the reliability database. Each year of operation strengthens the eventual case for international buyers. When the CJ1000A reaches certification, the aircraft becomes commercially distinct from one Washington can ground with a phone call. When EASA certification arrives, doors currently closed will open. The current reality is a clean sheet, 21st century airliner that is technically capable, commercially functional inside China, and effectively invisible everywhere else.